At my son's Christmas dinner, I stood in the middle of the room with one eye swollen completely shut. 50 guests stared at me in total silence. My son stood beside me smiling proudly and announced, "My wife taught him what respect really means." His wife sat there laughing, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Then my wife walked through that door and did something that left every single one of them completely speechless. Thank you so much for stopping by Dad's Revenge Stories. Your support means the world to me. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Please note this tale incorporates creative fictional elements for entertainment and educational purposes. While settings or names may be crafted, the vital lesson behind this story is completely timeless. My name is Walter Harmon. Most people call me Walt. I am 75 years old, and I used to be the kind of man who could build a house from the ground up with nothing but lumber, a good set of tools, and enough stubbornness to outlast the weather. I built the house on Clearwater Drive with my own two hands. Every beam, every window frame, every cabinet in that kitchen, I made them. My father taught me that a man's worth showed in what he built, not what he said. I believed that for most of my life. These days my hands shake when I pour my morning coffee. It was 3 days before Christmas. I was sitting alone at the kitchen table watching the pale December sun push through the window above the sink. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon from a candle Tiffany had put on the counter, one of those expensive ones she bought, and never asked if anyone else liked the smell. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A few houses down, someone had put up one of those inflatable Santas on their front lawn. It kept tilting to the left in the wind, like it was trying to fall over, but hadn't quite committed to it yet. I knew how that felt. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug and tried to remember the last time someone in this house had asked me how I was doing. Not the way Derek sometimes asked clipped, distracted the question already answered in his tone before I could open my mouth. I mean really asked. The way Elena used to ask sitting across from me at this same table, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, her eyes actually waiting for my answer. Elena had been teaching at a rural school district up near Fresno for the past 2 years, a federal literacy program, she said. She was 68 years old and still believed she could change things. I loved that about her. I missed that about her every single day. I tried to remember her phone number. I stared at the wall and concentrated. The way you do when a word is sitting right at the edge of your memory and refuses to come forward. I used to know her number by heart. Every number I had ever needed. Elena, my daughter Lily, my younger son Ryan, my buddies from the old carpentry crew, I used to keep them all in my head like a filing cabinet. The phone on the counter was a sleek thing Derek had given me 2 Christmases ago. He'd set it up himself, he said, so it would be easy for me to use. Large buttons, simple interface. He'd been very proud of it. What he hadn't mentioned was that the only numbers saved in it were his and Tiffany's. I set down my mug and rubbed my eyes. The morning light was thin and cold, the kind of California winter light that looked warm through the glass, but did nothing to heat the room. Somewhere upstairs, I could hear the faint sound of the television in Derek and Tiffany's bedroom. They rarely came down before 10. That gave me these quiet hours in the kitchen, which had become the only time I could hear myself think without measuring every thought against what reaction it might cause. I looked around the kitchen. My kitchen, or it used to be. The walls were painted a gray-blue color that Tiffany had chosen 18 months ago. She hadn't asked me. I'd come home from a doctor's appointment, and the walls were already done. The wooden spoon rack I'd built myself, the one Elena had hung garlands on every Christmas for 30 years, was gone. In its place was a metal shelf with matching containers that said things like flour and sugar in clean block letters. Everything was arranged just so. There was a framed photo above the refrigerator. It was Derek and Tiffany on a beach somewhere, both of them squinting into the sun, both of them grinning. a good-looking photo. There were no photos of Elena. There were no photos of Lily. There was one photo of Mason Derek's 7-year-old son on a little shelf near the hallway, a school portrait where he was wearing a collared shirt and smiling the cautious smile of a child who had learned early that some smiles were safer than others. Mason. He was the reason I got out of bed most mornings. That boy would come find me in whatever corner of the house I'd settled into and sit next to me without saying anything for a while, which was more companionship than most people were giving me. Last week he'd brought me one of his drawings, a picture of a house with a big tree in the yard and 2 stick figures standing in front of it. He'd written Grandpa and me at the bottom in his careful, crooked letters. I'd folded it and put it in the front pocket of my flannel shirt right over my chest. It was still there. I heard the stairs creak. 1, 2, 3. I knew every sound in this house, every groan of the wood, every rattling window. I'd built it after all. I knew which step landed heavy and which one Derek always skipped. These were his footsteps, slow and deliberate, the footsteps of a man who owned the floor he walked on. I picked up my coffee mug and turned back toward the window. Outside, the inflatable Santa had finally given up and flopped all the way to one side, sprawled across the lawn, with its arms out like it was reaching for something it couldn't quite get to. I heard Derek stop at the kitchen doorway. I didn't turn around. "You're up early," he said. "I'm always up early," I said. A pause. The refrigerator opened. Bottles shifted, the refrigerator closed. "We need to talk about the garden," he said, "before the holidays." My grip tightened on the mug. The garden was the last piece of property attached to this house that still had my name on it, a half-acre lot running along the back fence where Elena and I had planted tomatoes and peppers and herbs every summer for 25 years. I kept my voice level. "We can talk later," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "Sure," Derek said. His voice had that particular flatness that meant the conversation wasn't over. It was just being postponed to somewhere less comfortable. "Sure, Dad. Later." His footsteps moved away from the kitchen back toward the hallway. I listened until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I reached into the front pocket of my flannel shirt and touched the edge of Mason's drawing. The paper was soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. I didn't take it out. I just held my fingers against it the way you hold on to something small when everything large around you has already slipped away. After Derek went back upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The coffee went cold. I didn't notice until I took another sip and the chill of it hit the back of my throat. I set the mug down and stared at the grain of the wood tabletop oak solid, something I'd picked out myself at a lumber yard in Burbank 30 years ago. Good wood lasted. I used to believe the same thing about family. There was a time not so long ago when I paid every bill in this household myself. The mortgage, the utilities, the property taxes, I handled all of it. I had a checkbook I kept in the top drawer of my desk, and every month I'd sit down, go through the statements, write the checks by hand the way my father had taught me. It made me feel useful. It made me feel like I was still the man this house needed me to be. 3 years ago, Derek sat across from me at this same table with a stack of papers and a look of careful concern on his face. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking about your finances." I told him my finances were fine. "I know you think that," he said, and the way he said it, patient, slow, like he was explaining something to a child, made my jaw tighten. "But you've been forgetting things lately. The electric bill was late twice this year, and there was that thing with the pharmacy. The pharmacy incident had been a simple mistake. I'd handed the cashier the wrong card, realized it immediately, and fixed it in under a minute. Derek had been with me that day. He'd watched the whole thing with those careful eyes of his and said nothing at the time. He'd been saving it, I realized now, filing it away for exactly this kind of conversation. "I don't need help with my money," I said. "It's not about need, Dad. It's about protection." He slid a form across the table toward me. "This is a representative payee application. It's through the Social Security Administration, the federal agency that manages your retirement benefits. All it does is authorize me to receive your Social Security payments directly and manage them on your behalf. Lots of families do this when parents get older. It keeps everything organized." I looked at the form. The language was dense official, the kind of small print that swam in front of my eyes after the second paragraph. I asked him what it meant for my checking account. "You won't need the checking account anymore," he said. "I'll handle the bills. You won't have to worry about any of it." Something in me resisted. I told him I wanted to think about it. Derek leaned back in his chair. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice in those early days. He just nodded slowly, the way a man does when he's already decided the outcome and is simply waiting for you to arrive at the same place. "Of course," he said. "Take your time." 2 weeks later, Tiffany mentioned at dinner that Mason's preschool tuition was coming due, and things were a little tight that month. She said it lightly, casually, while passing the bread, but she looked at me when she said it. Mason was 4 years old then. He'd been going to a little school he loved, coming home with finger paintings and songs he'd sing in pieces, getting the words mixed up in ways that made me laugh out loud. I signed the form the next morning. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could reverse it any time I chose. What I didn't fully understand then, what I have had a great deal of time to understand since, was that once Derek was registered as my representative payee with the Social Security Administration, every dollar of my $1,850 per month in retirement benefits went directly into an account with his name on it. Not a joint account. His account. The SSA sent me a notice confirming the arrangement, which Derek intercepted from the mailbox before I ever saw it. Within 6 months, I had no money of my own. Not a dollar bill in my wallet, not a quarter in my pocket. If I wanted anything, a newspaper, a cup of coffee from the gas station down the road, a bottle of aspirin for my knees, I had to ask Tiffany. She would look at me with that particular expression. She had not quite a smile, not quite a frown, something that lived in the space between pity and contempt. And then she would decide whether what I was asking for was reasonable. Usually she decided it was not. "Dad, you really don't need a newspaper," she told me once. "Everything's online now. You're not going to read it anyway." I was 73 years old. I had read the newspaper every morning of my adult life. The worst part was not the money itself. The worst part was what Derek said to me one evening, about 4 months into the arrangement, when I'd made the mistake of asking if I could have a little cash on hand for emergencies. He'd looked at me across the dinner table, Mason sitting between us, eating his macaroni, and he'd lowered his voice to something almost gentle. "Dad," he said, "what kind of emergency are you planning for? You live here. We take care of you. You have everything you need." He paused. "Unless you're thinking about leaving. Is that what this is about?" I said no. "Because if you left," he said, still in that gentle voice, still with Mason right there between us, "I don't know that you'd be able to see Mason anymore. Things would get complicated. You understand how these things work." Mason looked up from his macaroni. He looked at me. He was 4 years old, and he already knew something was wrong, the way children know things before they have the words for them. "I understand," I told Derek. And I did. I understood completely. I reached into the front pocket of my shirt, the one where I kept Mason's drawing, and I pressed my fingers against the paper, until I could feel my own heartbeat pushing back through it. People ask me sometimes, not anymore, but they used to, how a man lets something like that happen. How a man lets his own son walk him into a notary's office and walk him back out without understanding what just changed. I used to ask myself the same question. I spent a lot of long nights in that house turning it over, looking for the exact moment I should have seen it coming. Here is what I know now. Derek never took anything from me all at once. He took things the way water takes a shoreline, slowly, patiently, one small piece at a time, until one morning you look up and the ground you were standing on is simply gone. It was about 12 months ago. A Tuesday in January, cold for California, the kind of damp, gray morning that settles into your joints and stays there. Derek came into the kitchen while I was eating breakfast and set a folder on the table next to my toast. "I need you to sign some paperwork today," he said. He was already dressed, car keys in his hand. "It's for the homeowner's insurance. They're updating the policy terms and they need a signature from a property owner. I made an appointment at the notary on Foothill Boulevard. Shouldn't take more than 20 minutes." I looked at the folder but didn't open it. "Can't it wait until after breakfast?" "The appointment's at 9, he said. "We need to leave in 10 minutes. I ate the rest of my toast standing at the counter. Derek drove. He talked the whole way about Mason's soccer league and a problem he was having with a supplier at work. Easy conversation that filled the car and left no room for questions. The notary office was a small place wedged between a dry cleaner and a cell phone repair shop. A woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain had me sit across from her at a narrow desk. She set several documents in front of me. Derek leaned against the wall behind her, arms crossed, watching. "Just your signature on the marked lines, Mr. Harmon," the notary said, pointing with her pen. The print was small. The language was the kind that wraps around itself words like grantor and attorney in fact and durable authority. I asked what attorney in fact meant. "It just means your son can handle property matters on your behalf," the notary said. "It's very standard for family situations." I looked back at Derek. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said, "Trust me," without saying anything at all. I thought about the homeowner's insurance. I thought about how I hadn't paid a bill in 3 years and didn't fully understand what that meant anymore. I thought about how tired I was of feeling like I was always 3 steps behind a conversation that everyone else had already finished. I signed. What I had actually signed was a durable power of attorney for real property, a legal document recognized under California probate code that granted Derek full authority to manage, lease, sell, or transfer my home on Clearwater Drive without requiring my involvement or approval. A durable power of attorney, unlike a regular one, does not expire if the person who signed it becomes incapacitated. It was, in other words, permanent. And it had been notarized, which made it entirely valid under California law. I did not learn any of this until much later. What I learned first was smaller. About a month after that Tuesday morning, Carol Brennan came over. Carol had lived next door for 20 years. She was 70, a widow, the kind of woman who showed up at your door with a casserole when things went wrong and never made you feel like a burden for accepting it. She knocked on the front door on a Saturday afternoon holding a plate of her oatmeal cookies, and when I opened the door, I saw her eyes go straight to a fading bruise along my forearm that I hadn't managed to cover with my sleeve. "Walt," she said, and the way she said my name, careful, low, made my chest tighten. Before I could say a word, Derek appeared behind me. He put his hand on my shoulder, and I felt the weight of it the way you feel a warning. "Carol," he said warmly. "What a nice surprise. Come on in." "Oh, I don't want to intrude," Carol said. Her eyes moved between Derek and me. "I just wanted to drop these off for Walt." "Dad loves your cookies," Derek said. He squeezed my shoulder. "Don't you, Dad?" "I do," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Carol handed me the plate. Her fingers touched mine for just a moment, and she pressed slightly, the smallest possible pressure, the kind that said, "I see you," without a single word passing between us. Then she looked at Derek and smiled the way people smile when they are performing pleasantness for someone they do not trust. "You're looking well, Derek," she said. "Doing my best," he said. "Taking good care of Dad. That's the priority." After Carol left, Derek closed the front door and stood with his back to it for a moment. The warmth in his face dissolved the way frost does when the sun hits it fast and without a trace. "She comes around a lot," he said. "She's a neighbor," I said. "She's been a neighbor for 20 years. Derek looked at me for a long moment. "Just make sure you're not filling her head with things that aren't her business." He pushed off the door and headed toward the stairs. "We don't need outsiders getting confused about how things work around here." I stood in the entryway holding Carol's plate of cookies. Through the narrow window beside the front door, I could see her crossing back to her own yard. She stopped at her mailbox and turned back to look at my house. She stood there long enough that I knew she wasn't checking her mail. She was checking on me. I lifted one hand and pressed it flat against the window glass. She couldn't have seen it from where she stood. But I held it there anyway, because it was the only thing I could think to do. Mason drew everything. That was the thing about him. He processed the world through pictures, the way other kids processed it, through words or noise or running in circles until they fell down. He drew our dog that had died 3 years before he was born, based entirely on a photo I'd shown him once. He drew the oak tree in the backyard with such careful attention to the way the roots lifted the soil near the base that I asked him how he knew to draw it that way. He said he'd sat under it and looked, 7 years old. Sat under the tree and looked. 6 months ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in June, I was sitting on the back porch watching the light go thin across the yard when Mason came outside and settled onto the step below me without being asked. He had his sketchbook with him, the big one with the red cover that Elena had mailed to him for his birthday. He opened it to a fresh page and started drawing. I didn't look over his shoulder. I had learned not to rush him. We sat like that for a while, the two of us, the yard quiet around us, the neighbor's wind chime doing its slow turning in the breeze. After maybe 15 minutes, Mason stopped drawing. He looked at what he'd made. Then he tore the page out very carefully, along the spiral edge, folded it twice, and held it out to me without a word. I unfolded it. The drawing showed 2 figures. One was tall, standing straight with large hands and a tool belt around its waist. I recognized myself, the way you recognize yourself in an old photograph, something familiar in the posture, even when the details are rough. The other figure was small, round-faced, standing close to the tall one with one arm raised, as if reaching up. Below the 2 figures, Mason had written in his careful block letters, "Me and Grandpa." And above them he had drawn a house, not the house we were sitting behind, but a different one, simpler, with a wide porch and a garden running along one side, and light coming from every window. A house that looked the way this one used to feel. I folded the drawing and put it in my shirt pocket, next to the other one I still carried. My throat was too tight to say much, so I just put my hand on the top of his head for a moment, and he leaned into it, the way kids do when they're tired and need to be steadied. 2 weeks after that, Elena came home for a long weekend. Derek had told her things were fine. He'd been telling her things were fine for months, and she'd had no reason to believe otherwise. The letters that came from this house said, "Walt was well, Walt was resting. Walt sent his love." Elena didn't know those letters had never been written by my hand. She arrived on a Friday evening. I heard her car pull into the driveway, and I was at the front door before she'd finished parking. When she came up the porch steps and saw my face, really saw it the way she always had, The way you can only see someone you have loved for 48 years, her smile flickered. Her eyes moved across my face the way a doctor's eyes move, careful and looking for something specific. Walt, she said quietly. Elena, I said, and I meant about 40 different things by it. Derek appeared in the hallway behind me. Mom, he said, his voice lifting into the warm register he used for company. You look great. Come on in, dinner's almost ready. Elena hugged me. She held on longer than she usually did, her arms tight around my back, her cheek against mine. I felt her hands move slightly, checking the way you check something you're afraid might be damaged. I held her back and didn't say anything, because Derek was right there, and Mason was coming down the stairs, and the timing was all wrong. The timing was never right anymore. At dinner, Elena sat across from Mason. She asked him about school, about his friends, about what he'd been drawing lately. Mason looked at his plate when he answered short, careful sentences, and I watched Elena watching him with that steady attention of hers. She had been teaching children for 40 years, and she understood what it meant when a child edited himself. After dinner, Derek poured wine in the living room and told a long story about a work trip to San Diego that I had heard a version of twice before. Elena laughed in the right places. She was good at that. I watched her and understood that she was collecting information, storing it away somewhere Derek couldn't see. Later that night, after Derek and Tiffany had gone upstairs, I sat with Elena at the kitchen table. She reached across and took both of my hands in hers. Her fingers found the spot on my forearm where a bruise had faded to yellow and pressed gently. How long, she said. Elena, Walt, how long? Before I could answer, we heard Mason's small feet on the stairs. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas, his red-covered sketchbook hugged against his chest. He looked at his grandmother. Then he crossed the kitchen, climbed up into the chair beside her, opened the sketchbook, and turned it to a page near the middle. Elena looked at the drawing. I watched her face change. She closed the sketchbook carefully. She set it on the table. She put one arm around Mason and pulled him close against her side, pressing her lips to the top of his head. Over his hair, her eyes met mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The next morning, when Elena packed her bag to leave, she hugged Mason goodbye at the door, and I watched her slip something into the front pocket of his little backpack, quickly, smoothly, the way a teacher passes a note without the rest of the class seeing. Mason looked up at her. She shook her head once, just barely, and he nodded. She whispered something in his ear that I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, Mason carried it with him back inside. His hand pressed flat over the front pocket of his backpack, the same way I carried his drawings pressed over my heart. I have spent most of my life working with my hands. Carpentry teaches you to be careful. Careful with measurements. Careful with materials. Careful with other people's things. You do not waste good wood. You do not leave tools where someone can trip on them. You do not touch what isn't yours without permission. These were not rules anyone had to teach me. They were simply how a person ought to move through the world. Tiffany operated on a different set of principles entirely. It was a Tuesday in November, about 4 weeks before Christmas. I was in the laundry room off the kitchen, transferring a load of towels from the washer to the dryer, which was one of the household tasks Derek had assigned me the previous spring. I didn't mind it. It gave me something useful to do, something with a clear beginning and end. And the laundry room was one of the few places in the house where nobody bothered me much. I had just started the dryer when Tiffany appeared in the doorway, holding a white dress on a hanger. It was a long dress, the kind people wore to formal events, with small beaded details along the neckline. I recognized it vaguely. She'd worn it to a charity dinner Derek had taken her to in October. "I need this washed," she said, holding it out toward me. I looked at it. That looks like dry clean only, I said. There was a tag visible near the shoulder seam. I know what it is, she said. Just hand wash it, gently. Use the delicate setting if you put it in the machine. Tiffany, the tag says dry clean. I don't want to damage it. She set her jaw. I'm not paying $40 to dry clean a dress I can wash at home. Just do it carefully. She hung the dress on the hook inside the laundry room door and left. I stood there for a moment looking at the dress. Then I looked at the tag. Dry clean only. Clear as anything. I took the dress off the hook and brought it to Tiffany in the living room where she was sitting with her phone. I really think you should take this to the cleaner, I said. I don't want to be responsible if something goes wrong. She looked up from her phone with the expression she reserved for conversations she considered beneath her. Walt, she said, and the way she used my name, flat, impatient, the way you'd say the name of a household appliance that was malfunctioning, made the back of my neck prickle. I am not asking you to perform surgery. I am asking you to wash a dress. Can you do that or not? I brought the dress back to the laundry room. I hand-washed it in the utility sink with cold water and a small amount of the gentle detergent Elena used for her good blouses. I was careful. I was more careful with that dress than I had been with anything in recent memory, because I knew the way you know things when you have lived long enough that this situation had the shape of a trap and I was already standing inside it. I laid the dress flat on a clean towel to dry the way the instructions on the detergent bottle suggested for delicate fabrics. Then I went to my room and read for an hour. When Tiffany's voice came from downstairs, it hit the upper registers of the house like something breaking. Walt, get down here, right now. I found her in the laundry room. The dress was on the floor. She was holding her phone out toward me, the flashlight on, shining it at the fabric. Across the front of the dress, from the neckline down to the hem, ran a series of pale, bleached-out streaks, the white fabric gone whiter in jagged lines, as though someone had dragged a wet sponge soaked in bleach straight down the front of it. Look at this, she said. Her voice was shaking with something that sounded like fury, but had a practiced quality to it, like an instrument she had tuned. Look at what you did. I didn't do that, I said. You washed it. I hand-washed it in cold water with gentle detergent. I laid it flat to dry on a clean towel. I did not touch bleach. I don't even know where the bleach is kept in this house. It's under the sink, she said immediately. Then she seemed to realize what she'd said because something shifted in her expression, fast, almost imperceptible, before she reset it back to outrage. The point is, this dress cost $400 and you ruined it. I did not ruin it, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. And I think you know that. For just a moment, 1/2 second, her eyes met mine with something in them that was not anger. It was closer to assessment. She was measuring how far I would push back. She was deciding whether I was still manageable. Then Derek's footsteps came down the stairs. He stood in the laundry room doorway, looking from the dress to Tiffany to me. Tiffany held the ruined dress up so he could see it clearly. Your father destroyed my dress, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word in a way that was almost artistic. Derek looked at me. His expression did not ask me for my side of the story. It never did. Dad, he said, with a heaviness that made the word feel like a verdict. How does something like this happen? I didn't use bleach, I said. I hand-washed it exactly the way she asked. Derek, someone did this deliberately. The streaks go straight down the front. That doesn't happen from a wash cycle. Derek rubbed the bridge of his nose. Dad, she asked you to do one thing. I did the one thing. I did it carefully. You're 75 years old, Derek said. Maybe you grabbed the wrong bottle. Maybe you don't remember. And there it was. That sentence. The one he kept holstered for moments exactly like this. Maybe you don't remember. 4 words that could erase any truth I tried to speak, any version of events I offered, any ground I tried to stand on. 4 words that turned me from a witness into an unreliable narrator of my own life. I didn't argue. There was no point in arguing. "I'm sorry about the dress," I said, because saying it was the only way to end the conversation. Tiffany folded the ruined dress over her arm and left the laundry room without looking at me. Derek followed her. At the doorway, he stopped and turned back. "No dinner tonight," he said. "I think you need some time to think about being more careful." He said it the way a parent says it to a child. He said it like it was reasonable. I stood alone in the laundry room after they left, my hands hanging at my sides. On the shelf above the utility sink, pushed to the very back behind a box of dryer sheets, I could see the top of a bottle of household bleach. The cap was slightly damp. I had not touched it. I turned off the laundry room light and went upstairs to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and pressed Mason's folded drawings against my chest with both hands, and I breathed slowly in and out until the shaking in my hands began to settle. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being disbelieved by someone who loves you. It is different from being ignored or dismissed by a stranger. When a stranger doesn't believe you, it stings and passes. When someone who has known you for 30 years looks at you with gentle, sympathetic eyes and quietly decides that what you are saying cannot be trusted, that stays with you. That settles into your bones and does not leave. Pastor Gerald Owen had been my friend since we were both younger men, with more hair and fewer regrets. We had served together on the church building committee in 1994, the year we raised enough money to replace the old roof on the fellowship hall. Gerald had preached at my mother's funeral. He had sat with Elena and me in the hospital the night Mason was born early, and we didn't know yet if the boy was going to be all right. He was the kind of man you called when the world went sideways because he answered, and he showed up and he stayed until things were steadier. Derek got to him sometime in late winter. I don't know exactly what was said. I only know the result. The first Sunday in March, I arrived at Clearwater Community Church, the way I had every Sunday for 31 years, and Gerald met me at the door with a warmth that was half a degree cooler than usual. Barely noticeable, the kind of thing only someone paying close attention would catch. "Walt," he said, gripping my hand. "Good to see you. How are you feeling?" "Fine," I said. "Why?" "Derek mentioned you've been having some trouble sleeping, some confusion in the mornings." Gerald kept his voice low, private kind. "Nothing to be embarrassed about, Walt. It happens to a lot of folks our age." I stared at him. "I'm not confused in the mornings, Gerald." He nodded slowly. That slow nod that meant he had already decided what he believed and was now simply waiting for me to finish speaking. "Of course," he said. "Of course you're not. Come on inside, service is about to start." I sat in my usual pew, third from the front on the left side, and I thought about what Derek must have told him. Not a dramatic story. Derek was never dramatic when subtle would do. Something small and concerned. Something that sounded like a worried son rather than a calculating one. "Dad's been a little off lately. His memory isn't what it was. Just keep an eye on him for me, would you? Don't let him upset himself." After the service, I tried twice more. Once with Gerald in the parking lot, telling him directly that things at home were not the way Derek described them. Gerald listened with his head tilted and his hands folded in front of him, the posture he used when counseling people through grief. "Walt," he said when I finished, "it sounds like you're under a lot of stress. That's completely understandable. Living with family can be complicated. Gerald, I am telling you that my son controls every dollar I have. I cannot make a phone call without his knowledge. I haven't spoken to Elena directly in months. Gerald put his hand on my shoulder. I spoke to Elena last week, he said. She said you were doing well. She said you seemed more settled than you'd been in a while. The ground shifted under me. Elena had said that. Or someone had said it using Elena's name the way they used my handwriting on those letters, the way they used my voice to keep everyone calm and at a safe distance. I looked at Gerald's honest, worried face and understood that there was no version of this conversation where he would believe me over the son who had called him with such concern, over the wife who had reportedly confirmed everything was fine. I was a confused old man. That was the story. And stories once planted in the right soil grow whether you tend them or not. I stopped trying to tell Gerald the truth at church. I sat in my pew each Sunday and sang the hymns I had known since childhood, and shook hands at the door, and said I was fine when people asked, which they did less and less as the months went on. The congregation was not unkind. They simply had no framework for what was actually happening, and Derek had helpfully provided them with one that required nothing further from any of them. That was when I started writing letters. I wrote to Elena every week. I wrote at night after Derek and Tiffany had gone upstairs, sitting at the small desk in my room, with the lamp turned low. I told her everything, the representative payee arrangement, the power of attorney, the dress, the things Derek said to me in private, the way Mason had started flinching at loud noises. I folded each letter, carefully addressed it in my steadiest handwriting, and left it on the front table to go out with the mail. None of them reached her. I know that now. What reached her instead were letters written in a hand that resembled mine, close enough to fool someone who hadn't watched me write in 2 years. That said things like, feeling well, keeping busy. Don't worry about making the drive, Walt sends his love. Cheerful brief, the letters of a man who had nothing to report because nothing was wrong. One evening, a reply arrived. I recognized Elena's stationery, the pale blue paper she had used for personal letters our entire marriage. I opened it at the front table, standing up, too eager to wait. The letter said she was glad I was feeling better. It said the students in Fresno were making good progress. It said she missed me and would try to visit before the holidays. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the bottom stair and held the letter in both hands and tried to find her in it. Not the words were fine, ordinary, exactly the kind of thing Elena might write. But the rhythm was slightly off. The way she ended her sentences. The particular way she always wrote my name at the start of a letter. Walt, my love, was missing. It just said Walt. Elena had called me Walt, my love, in every letter she had ever written me, for 48 years. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer on top of the stack of letters I had written and never sent. Then I sat in my room for a long time in the chair by the window, watching the streetlight outside come on as the evening darkened. Somewhere in this house was a telephone that had my wife's real number in it. Somewhere in this house was a way out of this. I just hadn't found it yet. But that night, thinking about the cold storage room off the back of the laundry room, I remembered something. 2 years ago, before Derek had taken my phone, I had moved some boxes in there and found an old landline phone, the kind with a cord, the kind Derek would never think twice about. I had plugged it into the wall jack to test it, heard the dial tone, and then gotten distracted and left it there. Derek didn't know about that phone. I was almost certain of it. And the number for Lily's cell phone, her number had not changed since she was in college, was one I still knew by heart. I pressed both palms flat against my knees to stop the trembling in my hands. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. But soon. Derek announced the Christmas party, the way he announced most things, as though the decision had already been made, the details already settled, and what he was offering me now was simply the courtesy of being informed. 50 guests, he said, standing at the kitchen counter with his coffee, not looking up from his phone. Private dining room at Harrington's on the 15th. I'm covering the whole thing. He swiped at his screen. It's going to be a good night. Important people will be there. Business contacts, neighbors, people from the church. He looked up then, and his eyes landed on me with the particular weight of an instruction being delivered. I need you to be presentable, Dad. Nice clothes, clean shave. And let me do the talking. It's a Christmas party, I said. Not a board meeting. Everything is a board meeting, Derek said, and went back to his phone. I thought about Carol Brennan, who Derek had just mentioned would be there, and Pastor Gerald. 50 people who had known me for years, who had accepted Derek's version of me, the confused old man the burden lovingly carried, and who would see me walk into that room and read whatever story Derek had dressed me in for the evening. The thought of it made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with my heart condition. 3 days before the party, Derek asked me to carry some boxes out to his car. Tax documents, he said. Filing things he needed to drop at his accountant's office. I brought the boxes out one at a time, stacking them in the back seat the way he'd asked. On my third trip, I set a box down on the back seat next to a leather document case I hadn't seen before, expensive looking, the kind with a zipper around 3 sides and a handle on top. The zipper was open. I am not a man who goes through other people's belongings. I have never been that man. But the top page was visible without my touching anything, and what I read on that top page made me stop breathing for a full 3 seconds. Last will and testament of Walter James Harmon. My name. My full legal name, the way it appeared on my birth certificate and my Social Security card, and every official document I had signed in 75 years of living. I stood beside Derek's car in the driveway, in the December cold, and read what I could see without touching the page. The document named Derek Allen Harmon as the sole beneficiary of all assets, including the property at Clearwater Drive and all associated holdings. It listed a signing date of September 15th of this year. It bore what was meant to look like my signature at the bottom of the visible page. I had not signed any document on September 15th of this year. I had not signed any document resembling a will at any point in the past decade, because Elena and I had agreed long ago that we would update our wills together with our own attorney when the time came. Under California law, forging a will is a felony, a crime covered under Penal Code, Section 470, the same statute that covers forging any legal document. It carries prison time. It is not a civil matter or a family dispute. It is a crime. I knew this because I had served on a jury once years ago in a case that involved a disputed estate, and the judge had been very clear about what the law considered acceptable and what it did not. My hands were steady. I noticed that. After months of trembling, my hands were completely steady. I reached into the pocket of my flannel shirt and took out the phone. Derek's old phone, the one with only his and Tiffany's numbers, the one I was supposed to use. But I had stopped carrying that one weeks ago. What I carried now, tucked flat against my chest, next to Mason's drawings, was something smaller. 3 weeks earlier, when Tiffany had sent me to the pharmacy to wait while she picked up a prescription the first time in months, she had let me out of the house without Derek. I had asked the young man behind the counter if I could use the store phone to call my daughter. He had let me without question. Lily had answered on the second ring. We had spoken for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I had told her I was all right, but that things needed to change. She had told me she already knew that Elena had already been in contact, that they were working on something. She had told me to hold on a little longer. She had also, before we hung up, told me her new number, which I had memorized on the walk back to the pharmacy counter, and repeated to myself every night since. What I was carrying in my shirt pocket was a disposable phone, a prepaid phone Lily had mailed to Carol Brennan, who had walked it over to me tucked inside a container of oatmeal cookies 3 days later. Derek had not searched the cookie container. I took the disposable phone out now and photographed the top page of the will document through the open zipper of Derek's document case. Then I photographed the signature page, which was visible when I leaned slightly to the right. I did not touch the case. I did not move anything. I straightened up, put the phone back in my pocket, and went inside to get the last box. When Derek came out to check on me, I was standing beside the car with the final box in my arms, waiting calmly. "All set," I said. He looked at me for a moment. Something in my face must have been different, steadier maybe, or simply less afraid, because his eyes narrowed slightly before he took the box from me and put it in the trunk. "Go back inside, Dad," he said. "It's cold out here." I went inside. I sat at the kitchen table and wrapped both hands around a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, and I felt something move through my chest that I had not felt in a very long time. Mason came downstairs and climbed into the chair across from me. He looked at my face the way he always did, carefully checking something. "You okay, Grandpa?" he asked. "Yeah, buddy," I said. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I meant it. "I think I'm going to be okay." Mason studied me for another moment. Then he reached across the table and put his small hand over mine. "Good," he said seriously. "Because I've been waiting." Christmas Eve morning arrived the way bad days always did in that house, quietly, without warning, wearing the ordinary face of a Tuesday. I was awake before 5. I lay in bed for a while, listening to the sounds the house made in the dark. The furnace cycling on and off, the tick of the pipes, the particular creak of the third floorboard in the hallway that I had never gotten around to fixing. I knew every sound this house made the way you know the breathing of someone you have slept beside for decades. The house was mine. Whatever Derek had put his name on, whatever papers had been signed in whatever offices, the house was mine. In the only way that had ever mattered to me, I knew it, and it knew me. I got up at 5:30 and went downstairs. The kitchen was dark. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp above the stove, the one Elena had picked out at a shop in Pasadena the year Mason was born. The light it gave was warm and low and enough. I put the coffee on and stood at the window while it brewed, watching the sky go from black to the particular dark blue that comes just before dawn in December. Elena and I had planted the garden together in the spring of 1997. Tomatoes along the south fence, peppers down the middle, herbs in the raised beds I'd built from cedar, because cedar held up better against the moisture. We had grown things in that garden every year for 26 years, and even after Elena left for Fresno, I had kept it going. Last summer, Derek had let the irrigation system go dry for 3 weeks, and most of the summer crop had failed, but the garden itself was still there. The beds, the fence, the cedar planks I'd cut and fitted and sanded myself. Derek wanted to sell it. He had been working toward that for 6 months, mentioning it the way he mentioned things he had already decided offhand, reasonable sounding, as though the conclusion were obvious, and my resistance was the only thing standing between common sense and resolution. The lot behind the main property had been assessed at a value that made his eyes go bright when he talked about it. A developer had expressed interest. All it needed was my signature. I had not given it. I was on my second cup of coffee when I heard him on the stairs. Derek moved differently in the mornings, heavier, less composed, the performance of ease he maintained during the day, not yet fully assembled. He came into the kitchen in a gray sweatshirt, saw me at the table, and went straight to the coffee without speaking. He poured a cup. He stood at the counter with his back to me for a moment. Then he turned around and set a document on the table in front of me. A pen landed beside it with a small click. "I need that signed today," he said. I looked at the document. Property transfer agreement. The garden lot. The developer's name in clean typescript at the top. No, I said. Derek set his coffee cup down. Dad? No, I said again. Your mother and I planted that garden together. It's not for sale. Mom isn't here, Derek said. His voice had shifted into the register he used when patience was a performance he was deciding whether to continue. And that lot is sitting there generating nothing. The offer is good. It won't be there forever. Then it won't be there forever, I said. I'm not signing it. Derek pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. He leaned forward with his forearms on the table, and I recognized the posture. It was the posture of a man who had decided that conversation had run its course. I have been patient with you, he said quietly. I have given you a home. I have managed your finances so you didn't have to worry. I have handled everything, Dad, everything, and all I am asking you to do is sign one piece of paper. You have managed my finances, I said, because you arranged it so that you could. That is not the same as doing me a favor. Something shifted in his face. It was not quite anger, and not quite surprise. It was closer to the look of a man who had been moving furniture in a room and discovered that one of the pieces was heavier than he'd accounted for. Sign the paper, he said. No. He stood up. He was not a small man. He had my height and his mother's broad shoulders, and in that moment the kitchen felt considerably smaller than its square footage suggested. I did not stand up. I stayed in my chair with both hands wrapped around my coffee mug, and I looked at my son, and I did not look away. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. I want to be precise about what I remember, because I have gone over it many times since. Derek moved around the side of the table. His hand came down on my left shoulder with a force that was not a push and not a strike, but something that lived between the two, a weight applied suddenly, a loss of equilibrium. I reached for the edge of the table. My hand did not find it in time. The corner of the kitchen cabinet caught me on the left side of my face as I went down above the eye, where the bone is close to the surface. I landed on the kitchen floor. The linoleum was cold against my cheek. I stayed very still for a moment, the way you stay still when you are assessing damage before you try to move. My left eye was already beginning to swell. I could feel it, a heat spreading outward from the point of impact, the skin tightening the way skin does when fluid begins to gather beneath it. Above my eyebrow, something was bleeding. Not heavily, but bleeding. I pressed my palm flat against the floor and pushed myself up to sitting. Derek was standing by the counter. He had picked up his coffee cup again. His expression had settled back into something almost ordinary, the way a lake settles after something has been dropped into it, the surface going smooth, while whatever caused the disruption sinks out of sight. Clean yourself up, he said. We have the party tonight. He set the cup in the sink. 3. And Dad, you fell. You were getting up from the table too fast and lost your balance. That's the story. He grabbed the disposable phone he'd just spotted sticking out of my pocket, slipped it into his jacket, and looked at me directly. Say it back to me. My eye throbbed. The floor under me was the same floor I had laid myself 30 years ago on a Saturday in October when Elena was pregnant with Derek and too tired to help, and I had told her to rest. I could handle it, and I had. I fell, I said. Derek nodded once. Good. He left the kitchen. I heard him on the stairs, his footsteps steady and unhurried, going back up to get ready for the evening. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long moment. Then I reached into my shirt pocket and took out the disposable phone. My hands were shaking badly enough that it took me 3 tries to navigate to the last number I had called. Lily answered before the first ring had finished. Dad! Her voice was sharp alert, as though she had been waiting with the phone already in her hand. Dad, What happened? It's time, I said. My voice came out steadier than I had any right to expect. Lily, it's time. Tell your mother. Derek put me in the storage room at 9:45 in the morning. He didn't use that word put. He said he needed me to stay out of the way while he and Tiffany got ready for the evening, that I was agitated, and he didn't want me upsetting Mason, that it would be better for everyone if I rested somewhere quiet for a few hours. He said all of this in a reasonable voice, the voice of a man managing a difficult situation with admirable patience. Then he opened the storage room door, waited for me to walk through it, and turned the key in the lock from the outside. The storage room was off the back of the laundry room, a narrow space maybe 8 feet by 10 with bare shelving along 2 walls and a single bare bulb in the ceiling operated by a pull string. I had built those shelves myself. I had wired the light fixture myself. I had stood in this exact room 2 years ago, moving boxes to make space for holiday decorations, and found the old telephone sitting on the bottom shelf behind a broken humidifier and a stack of Mason's outgrown picture books. I found it again now. It was a beige push-button phone, the kind that had been ordinary in every American household in the 1980s and 90s. Corded, heavy, the kind built to last because things were built to last then. I pulled it out from behind the humidifier and followed the cord to the wall. Jacket was still plugged into a jack I had installed myself when we finished this room, because I had always believed every room should have a phone line. That belief had once seemed like the harmless habit of a careful man. It felt now like the single most important decision I had made in years. I lifted the receiver. The dial tone came through clean and steady. I sat down on the floor with my back against the shelving and the phone in my lap, and I dialed Lily's number from memory. I had been repeating it to myself every night for 3 weeks like a prayer, the 10 digits that connected me to my daughter, to Elena, to the world outside this house that Derek had spent 3 years shrinking down to the size of a room I could be locked into. Lily answered on the first ring. "Dad?" Her voice cracked on the single syllable. "Dad, where are you? Are you okay?" "I've been waiting since you called this morning. I tried the disposable phone 3 times. He took it," I said. "When he put me in here, he checked my pockets. He didn't find this number, though." I paused. "Lily, I'm in the storage room. He locked the door." The silence on her end lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then I heard her exhale a long, controlled breath, the kind you take when you are deciding to be steady instead of frightened. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Dad. I need you to keep talking to me. Mom and I are already on the road. We left at 7 this morning." "You were already coming." "We were already coming," she said. "We've been ready for 2 weeks. We just needed you to make the call." Her voice softened. "Are you hurt?" I touched the skin around my left eye with 2 fingers. The swelling had gone hard, and the color had deepened. I could not see it, but I could feel the heat of it radiating outward, and when I caught my reflection in the dark screen of a framed photo on the shelf across from me, I could see the shadow of it even in poor light. "My eye is swollen," I said. "Above the eyebrow, too. I'm all right." I heard Lily make a sound that she stopped before it became what it wanted to be. "I'm recording this call," she said. "I need you to know that. Under California law, a phone call can be recorded if one party to the conversation gives consent. I'm giving consent right now, and I need you to know it's being recorded so that you can choose whether to continue." "Record everything," I said. "Tell me what happened this morning, in your own words, at your own pace." So I told her. I sat on the floor of the storage room I had built with my own hands, in the house I had built with my own hands, and I told my daughter everything. The kitchen table, the property transfer agreement. Derek's voice going flat when I said no. The cabinet corner. The linoleum floor. Derek telling me to say I had fallen. My voice broke twice. I did not try to hold it together. I was 75 years old, and I was locked in a room, and I was done holding things together for the sake of appearances. When I finished, Lily was quiet for a moment. "Dad," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Did Derek cause your injury this morning?" "Yes," I said. "Say it in a complete sentence for the recording." I understood what she was doing. She was building something the same way that I had built things my whole life, carefully with the right materials, one piece at a time. "Derek caused the injury to my eye and eyebrow this morning in the kitchen of the house at Clearwater Drive," I said. "I did not fall on my own. I did not lose my balance. He did it." "Thank you," Lily said quietly. "We're about 2 hours out. Mom wants to talk to you." There was a rustling, and then Elena's voice came through the receiver, and something in my chest that had been clenched for months simply let go. "Walt," she said. "Elena," I said. And my eyes filled, and I let them because there was no one in that room to perform steadiness for. "I got your letters," she said. "Not the ones that were delivered. The real ones. Carol photographed them before Derek could intercept them and sent me the images. I've had them for months. I've read every word." I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth. "I should have come sooner," she said. "Walt, I should have—" "You're coming now," I said. "That's what matters." We stayed on the line together for a while after that, not always speaking the way you stay on the line with someone when the connection itself is the important thing. Somewhere above me in the house, I could hear movement, footsteps, water running, the sounds of Derek and Tiffany preparing for an evening they believed was still entirely theirs to control. Then my phone buzzed, not the landline, but the disposable phone, which Derek had taken from my shirt pocket, but had apparently left on the kitchen counter, because what came through was a forwarded text message from Lily, who had received it 20 minutes ago from a number she recognized. Mason's iPad. Mason, who was 7 years old and had been waiting. The message read, "Aunt Lily, Daddy locked Grandpa in the storage room. Grandpa was crying. His eye looks really bad. Please come." I put Grandpa's drawings in my backpack so nobody finds them. I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone down carefully on the shelf beside me and pressed both hands over my face and cried. Not the careful, contained tears of a man managing himself, but the real thing, full and ragged. The kind of crying that comes when something you have been carrying alone for a very long time is finally being carried by more than one person. From the other end of the still open landline, I heard Elena's voice, steady and warm. "We're coming, Walt," she said. "We're already coming. Just hold on a little longer." Outside the storage room door, the house went on with its preparations. Inside, I held the receiver against my ear and listened to the sound of my wife's breathing and the distant hum of a car engine. And I held on. Time moves differently in a locked room. I had built that storage room to hold things, holiday decorations, old tools, the boxes of paperwork that accumulate over a lifetime and never quite get sorted. I had not built it to hold a person. But there I was, 75 years old, sitting on the concrete floor, with my back against the shelving I had made from 2x4s and a borrowed table saw, watching the thin line of light under the door shift as the morning became afternoon. I kept the landline receiver beside me. The line to Lily's phone stayed open for the first hour, neither of us speaking much, just the connection itself, a kind of company. At some point, she said she needed both hands to drive and asked if I was all right to stay quiet for a while. I told her I was. I set the receiver on the shelf and listened to the faint sounds of the highway, coming through the rush of other cars, passing the occasional voice on the radio. that Lily turned low, the particular quality of road noise that tells you someone is moving fast and with purpose. I found a cardboard box near the back of the room and pulled it toward me to use as a backrest. Inside the box were Mason's outgrown picture books, board books from when he was 2 and 3, the spines worn soft from being handled so many times. I lifted out the one on top, a book about a little engine that kept going when the grade got steep. I had read it to Mason so many times that I knew every page without looking. I set it in my lap and rested my hands on the cover and sat with it for a while. Through the ceiling above me, I could hear the sounds of the house, Tiffany's footsteps moving between the bedroom and the bathroom, the rush of the shower, the particular sound of the hairdryer that Tiffany used every evening before going out. Derek's voice, once brief and deep, a phone call in the hallway. The sounds of people preparing for an evening they believed belonged entirely to them. Around 11 in the morning, Lily's voice came back through the receiver. "Dad, you still there?" "Still here," I said. "Okay, we just passed Bakersfield, about 2.5 hours out." I heard her exhale. "Mom wants me to tell you something. She says she's been in contact with a woman named Detective Sandra Okafor. She works elder abuse cases for the county. Mom reached out to her 6 weeks ago." I was quiet for a moment. "How did your mother find her?" "Carol gave her the name," Lily said. "Carol had already filed an informal report 6 months ago. She documented every time she saw you with unexplained injuries, every time Derek turned her away at the door. She kept a log, Dad, 22 entries. I thought about Carol standing at her mailbox watching my house. I thought about her fingers pressing mine when she handed me the cookies, the pressure that meant something without words. 22 entries. Carol Brennan had been keeping records while I was locked out of my own story. "Where is Detective Okafor now?" I asked. "She'll be at the party tonight," Lily said. "Carol invited her. She'll be there as a guest. She's been briefed on everything, the recordings, the photos, the documents. She's waiting for the evidence to be presented publicly before she acts." She told Mom that in elder abuse cases, a public confession in front of witnesses is the strongest possible foundation for a case that can't be appealed away in court. I understood the logic of it. Derek had spent 3 years building a story in which I was confused and unreliable. A private confrontation could be dismissed as a family dispute, my word against his, an old man's accusations. What Detective Okafor needed was what she was going to get. Tonight, Derek, in a room full of people he had invited himself with no exit, and no version of events that could survive what Elena was carrying in that car. "Ryan is coming," Lily added. "I called him last week. He drove down from Seattle yesterday, and he's been staying at a motel in Burbank. Derek told him 2 years ago that you didn't want to hear from him. He spent 2 years believing that." My chest tightened. Ryan, my younger son, the quieter one, the one who called every Sunday when he was in college and still remembered my birthday every year without being reminded. Derek had taken him too. He had taken everyone one by one, rearranging the people in my life, the way you rearrange furniture, until the room looked the way he wanted it to look, and I was the only one left who remembered how it had been before. "Is he angry?" I asked. "Ryan, is he angry at me?" "Dad." Lily's voice was firm and gentle, at the same time the way Elena's voice got when she was telling me something what I needed to hear clearly. "He cried when I told him the truth. He drove 17 hours. He is not angry at you." I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes and breathed. Around 2 in the afternoon, I heard Derek unlock the storage room door. I had returned Mason's book to the box and straightened up as best I could and put the landline receiver back in its cradle. When the door opened, Derek stood in the frame with the light behind him and looked at me on the floor. Something moved across his face when he saw my eye, quickly gone before it settled into anything I could name. Regret, maybe, or simply the calculation of a man assessing how visible the damage was and what story it required. "Time to get ready," he said. "Party starts at 7. He handed me a garment bag, a suit he had apparently chosen for me, dark gray one I had not worn since Elena's sister's retirement dinner 3 years ago. "I want you to look presentable," he said. "And Dad, remember what we talked about this morning." "I remember," I said. I stood up from the floor. My knees ached, and my back was stiff, and my left eye had swollen enough that my vision on that side was reduced to a narrow band of light. I took the garment bag from him, and I looked at my son in the doorway of the room he had locked me into, and I thought about Elena somewhere on the highway, about Lily's hands steady on the wheel, about Ryan checking out of a Burbank motel and driving toward this house, about Detective Sandra Okafor sitting in Carol Brennan's passenger seat, heading toward Harrington's restaurant, about Mason somewhere upstairs with his grandfather's drawings folded in the front pocket of his backpack, all of them moving, all of them coming. "I'll be ready in 20 minutes, I said. Derek nodded and stepped back from the doorway. I walked past him into the laundry room carrying the suit he had chosen, and I did not look back at the storage room because I was done looking back. Tonight, I thought. Tonight it ends. Harrington's was the kind of restaurant that existed to make people feel important. Dark wood paneling, low, warm lighting, white tablecloths pressed flat as paper, the smell of roasted meat, and expensive candles mixing in the air near the entrance. They had decorated for Christmas pine wreaths on every door. White lights wound through the railings of the staircase, a tall tree in the lobby, with ornaments that matched the color scheme and looked like no child had ever been allowed near them. It was beautiful the way a stage set is beautiful, designed to be looked at, designed to make whatever happened inside it seem significant. Derek had reserved the private dining room on the upper level. 40 minutes before we arrived, I had stood in my bedroom in the gray suit he had chosen and looked at myself in the mirror above the dresser. The dresser Elena had refinished herself the summer after Lily was born, stripping and repainting it, a soft cream color that had faded now to something warmer and more honest. The man in the mirror looked like he had been through something. There was no version of foundation or careful lighting that was going to change what my left eye looked like at 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve. The skin around it had gone the dark purple of a late-season plum, swollen and tight, the cut above the eyebrow closed now, but still visible as a dark line. My face was the face of a man who was going to walk into a room full of people who knew him and let them see exactly what had been done. Derek had checked my appearance before we left the house. He stood in the entryway and looked at my face with the careful attention of a man assessing a liability. "I'll tell them you had a fall," he said. "Don't contradict me." "All right," I said. Tiffany came down the stairs in a red dress and heels. Her hair done her expression composed into the particular brightness she wore in public, animated warm the expression of a woman at a party she intended to enjoy. She looked at my face and her brightness did not flicker even slightly. "Let's go," she said. "I don't want to be late." Mason rode with us. Derek had decided, for reasons he did not explain, that Mason would attend the first hour of the party before being taken home by a neighbor. Mason sat in the back seat beside me, pressed close against my arm, his small body warm through the fabric of my jacket. He did not look at my face directly. He looked at his hands in his lap, and once, very carefully, he reached over and found my hand in the dark of the back seat and held on to two of my fingers the way he had when he was 4 years old and somewhere unfamiliar. I held on. Harrington's parking lot was already full when we arrived. Derek pulled up to the entrance and a young man in a green vest opened the car door. Derek came around to my side and took my arm to help me out. The gesture looked considerate from the outside, his hand under my elbow, his posture attentive. His grip was tight enough to communicate something that had nothing to do with consideration. "Smile," he said quietly near my ear, "and remember you fell." The private dining room was at the top of a short staircase and through a set of double doors. I could hear the party. Before we reached it, voices layered over each other, the particular sound of a crowd that has had one drink and is warming toward a second laughter, arriving in small bursts from different corners of the room. The doors were closed. A young woman in a black vest stood beside them. Derek straightened his jacket. Tiffany adjusted something near her ear. Mason pressed closer to my side. The young woman opened the doors. The room was full and bright and loud, and then it wasn't. It took about 4 seconds. 4 seconds for the people nearest the door to register us, to register me, and for something to change in their expressions. The change moved outward through the room the way a change in weather moves across open water, a shift in pressure you feel before you fully understand it. Voices dropped. Glasses paused. By the time we were fully through the doorway, the room had gone from the warm noise of a party to something close to silence. They were looking at my face. I had known they would. I had stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom and understood exactly what 50 people were going to see when I walked through that door. But understanding it and living it were two different things. 50 people I had known for years, people who had come to this party expecting an evening of Christmas music and good food, and whatever version of the Harmon family, Derek had invited them to celebrate. 50 people looking at my face with an expression that started as confusion and was rapidly becoming something else. I saw Carol Brennan near the far wall standing with a woman I did not recognize, a woman in her mid-40s, with close-cropped hair and the particular stillness of someone who was watching rather than participating. Carol met my eyes from across the room. She did not smile. She gave me a single, slow nod, the kind that meant, "I see you, and I am here," and I had to look away before I lost whatever composure I had left. I saw Pastor Gerald near the center of the room, a glass in his hand, his face going through several expressions in quick succession as he registered what he was seeing. He took a step forward and then stopped himself, and in the stopping, I saw the beginning of something understanding, arriving late and landing hard. Derek's hand tightened on my arm. He lifted his chin and addressed the room with the ease of a man who had been preparing for this moment. "I know what you're all thinking," he said. His voice was warm and caring, filling the room the way he always filled rooms, comfortable in the center of attention. "Dad had a little accident getting ready this evening." He paused, and I felt him look down at me, and I kept my eyes forward. "Clumsy old guy, you know how it is. Took a fall on the stairs. He's fine." Another pause. "We almost didn't come tonight, but Dad insisted. He didn't want to miss celebrating with all of you." The room was still quiet. People were still looking at my face. The story Derek was offering them was reasonable and ordinary. Old man falls, worried family brings him out anyway, life goes on. It was exactly the kind of story that settles over a room like a blanket and lets everyone go back to their drinks. Except nobody was reaching for their drinks. Tiffany laughed lightly beside Derek, the sound dropping into the silence like something that didn't belong there. She reached up and straightened Derek's lapel, a small domestic gesture that was meant to soften the room, to say, "Look at us. Aren't we good people? Aren't we a family?" Mason's fingers tightened around mine. And then from somewhere behind the crowd, from the direction of the second entrance on the far side of the room that led from the restaurant's main floor, I heard a sound I had not heard in months. The door opened. Not the careful opening of someone arriving politely. The opening of someone who had driven 4 hours through winter darkness and was not stopping for anything. The crowd nearest that entrance turned first. Then the turn moved through the room, heads swiveling until everyone, Derek, Tiffany, Pastor, Gerald, Carol, all 50 people who had come to celebrate Christmas, was looking at the same place. I turned too, and there was Elena. Before I reveal the explosive moment when the ultimate truth comes out and shatters this entire room, I need a quick favor from you. Please type, "Still here," or drop a 777 in the comments right now, so I know you are sitting tight for the climax. Your engagement truly helps support the channel. Also, please take note. The upcoming portion of our story contains fictionalized, dramatic elements added for entertainment, so it may not reflect exact events. I heard her before I fully saw her. After 8 months of silence, 8 months of intercepted letters and borrowed voices, and the particular absence that opens up in a house when the person you love most has been carefully edited out of it, I heard Elena's footsteps on the hardwood floor of Harrington's private dining room, and something in my chest cracked open like ice in early spring. Not breaking, releasing. She was still wearing her coat. A dark green wool coat she had owned for 12 years, the one with the 2 front pockets. She was always putting things into and forgetting about receipts, guitar picks from the music program. She ran folded notes from students. Her hair was damp at the temples from the cold outside. She had driven 4 hours through December darkness, and she had not stopped to fix herself up in a restaurant bathroom before walking through that door, and the fact of that, the straightforwardness of it. Elena arriving exactly as she was made me feel something I had not felt in a very long time, safe. The room was watching her. 50 people who had been frozen by the sight of my face now redirected their stillness toward this woman in a travel-worn coat walking through their Christmas party like she had somewhere specific to be, which she did. She came straight to me. Derek moved first. He took a step sideways, positioning himself between Elena and where I stood, his chin lifting, his voice assembling itself into something warm and surprised. "Elena," he said. I didn't know you were coming. Why didn't you call?" Elena walked around him the way water moves around a stone. She did not look at him. She did not acknowledge that he had spoken. She came directly to me and stopped, and she looked at my face not the way Derek had looked at it, calculating damage and story, but the way a person looks at something that matters to them and has been hurt. Her right hand came up and touched my cheek just below the swelling. Her fingers were cold from outside. I didn't move. "Walt," she said. Her voice was barely above speaking volume, but it carried through that silent room like a bell. "Elena," I said. Her eyes were bright, and her jaw was set. And she was not going to cry, not yet. Not here, because there was something she had come here to do first. I could see it in the way she was holding herself, that particular posture she got when she had decided something and was not available for discussion about it. She turned then and looked at Derek. I had seen Elena angry 3 times in 48 years of marriage. Once when a contractor cheated us on materials for the back deck. Once when a school board member tried to cut the music program she had built from nothing. Once when Derek was 17 and came home with a lie so obvious it embarrassed everyone present. Each time her anger had the same quality, not loud, not theatrical, but absolute. The anger of someone who had decided that a line had been crossed and was now simply dealing with the fact of it. Derek met her eyes, and I watched something happen to his confidence. It did not disappear. It flickered. Like a light when the power stutters still on, but briefly less certain of itself. "Mom," he said. "Let me explain what—" "Not yet," Elena said. She reached into the left pocket of her green coat and took out her phone. Lily had uploaded the emergency call recording to their shared drive the moment we hung up. Elena held the phone high screen toward Derek and pressed play. Walt's voice came through the speaker. My voice raw and fractured from the storage room that morning. I heard myself tell Lily what had happened in the kitchen. I heard myself say Derek's name in a complete sentence that left no room for interpretation. The room was so quiet, I could hear the Christmas music that had been playing softly through the restaurant's speakers, something instrumental, something with bells continuing underneath my recorded voice as though the evening were still ordinary. Derek's face did something complicated. His eyes moved around the room, measuring, calculating. "That's been edited," he said. "You can't just, that's taken completely out of—" "There are 50 people in this room," Elena said. "And I have 2 hours of recordings. Would you like to keep going?" Derek looked at Tiffany. Tiffany was looking at the floor. Elena crossed the room toward the small, raised platform near the far wall, where the restaurant had set up a microphone for Derek's planned remarks. A toast, a speech, whatever performance he had intended for the evening. She stepped up onto the platform. She picked up the microphone. She turned to face the room. Lily appeared in the doorway behind me. I turned and saw her, my daughter, 35 years old, still wearing her jacket. From the drive, her eyes moving across the room, in rapid assessment, the way they had since she was a child, cataloging, deciding. Her eyes found mine, and she crossed to me immediately and put both arms around me, pressing her face briefly against my shoulder. "Hi, Dad," she said into my jacket. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. She pulled back and looked at my face with the same careful attention Elena had given it, and her expression did the same thing, something moving behind her eyes that she pressed down and put away for later. "I've got you," she said quietly. "We've both got you." "Okay." I nodded. My throat was too full to manage more than that. Derek had moved toward the platform where Elena stood. He stopped at the edge of it, his voice dropping low and urgent. "Elena, I am asking you not to do this. Whatever you think you know—" "Derek." Elena's voice through the microphone was calm and clear and reached every corner of that room. "Sit down." She did not say it loudly. She said it the way a teacher of 40 years says something to a room that needs to be still with the absolute certainty that it will be obeyed. Derek stopped moving. His mouth closed. Elena looked out at the 50 people who had come to celebrate Christmas and were now standing in the middle of something else entirely. "My name is Elena Harmon," she said. "I have been married to that man for 48 years. She looked at me directly when she said it, and I looked back at her, and the distance between us across that room felt like nothing at all. "And tonight, I need to tell you all something. I need to tell you what has been happening in our family. Not the version my son has been telling. The real one." The room did not move. The bells in the background music kept ringing soft and steady, completely indifferent to the fact that everything was about to change. Behind Derek, Tiffany's chair scraped back against the floor. Lily's hand found my arm. "Here we go," Lily said quietly. Elena did not raise her voice once. That was the thing kept coming back to afterward, in the days and weeks that followed, when I replayed it in my mind, the way you replay something that changed the shape of your life. She stood at that microphone, in her travel coat, with her damp hair and her cold hands, and she spoke to 50 people in the same voice she had used for 40 years, in classrooms full of children who needed someone to make the complicated things clear. Steady, measured, each word placed where it needed to go. She started at the beginning. "3 years ago," she said, "my son registered himself as Walt's representative payee with the Social Security Administration. That is a federal program that allows a designated person to receive and manage Social Security benefits on behalf of someone who needs assistance." Derek told the SSA that Walt had early-stage dementia. Walt does not have dementia. Walt has never been diagnosed with any cognitive impairment. Derek provided false information to a federal agency in order to take control of Walt's retirement income, $1,850 every month for 3 years. The room was absolutely still. I watched faces change, people doing the math, understanding what 3 years of someone else's retirement income meant, what it bought, what it cost. 14 months ago, Elena continued, Derek took Walt to a notary office on Foothill Boulevard and had him sign a durable power of attorney for real property. Walt was told he was signing updated homeowners insurance paperwork. A durable power of attorney under California law grants the named agent, in this case Derek, full legal authority to manage, sell, or transfer real property without the owner's consent or knowledge. Walt signed over control of the home he built with his own hands, without understanding what he was signing. Pastor Gerald set his glass down on the nearest table. The sound of it was very small in the silence. 3 months ago, Elena said, my son commissioned a forged will. She reached into her coat pocket and produced a folded document, the photographs Walt had taken with the disposable phone printed and carried here in her pocket for this moment. She held them up so the room could see. This document, bearing a forged version of Walt's signature, names Derek as the sole beneficiary of all assets. It removes my name. It removes our daughter Lily's name. Derek took a step toward the platform. That document is not... It was in your car, Elena said, and the 5 words stopped him as completely as a wall. In the document case you left on the back seat on December 17th. Walt photographed it. I have the originals of those photographs time-stamped on his phone, and I have already provided copies to the appropriate authorities. The room shifted. People were looking at Derek now, not with the polite attention of party guests, with something harder. Elena was not finished. This morning, she said, on Christmas Eve in the kitchen of the house Walt built, Derek caused an injury to Walt's left eye and eyebrow when Walt refused to sign over the last piece of property still in his name, the garden lot that Walt and I planted together 26 years ago. Her voice did not waver. Walt called our daughter Lily from a locked storage room where Derek had confined him and gave a recorded account of what happened. That recording has been provided to law enforcement. She paused. She looked out at the room, and then she looked at me, standing with Lily's hand on my arm near the back of the crowd that had formed a loose half-circle around the space where Derek stood. My husband, she said, is 75 years old. He built the house you all have visited. He built the bookshelves in the church library, Gerald. She looked at Pastor Gerald directly. He built the storage benches in the fellowship hall. He has been a member of this community for 31 years, and he has spent the last 3 of those years being systematically isolated from everyone who loved him by the person who should have protected him most. Pastor Gerald's face had gone very still. He was not looking at his glass. He was looking at Walt with an expression that had passed through several stages and arrived somewhere that looked like grief. Elena reached into her coat pocket one more time and produced a thick envelope. Carol Brennan, she said, documented 22 separate incidents over the past 18 months, photographs of injuries, dates and times of observed events, written accounts of conversations she witnessed. This documentation, combined with the recordings and the financial records, has been provided to Detective Sandra Okafor of the County Elder Abuse Unit, who is present in this room tonight. Near the far wall, the woman who had been standing with Carol straightened and inclined her head slightly, not drawing attention, simply confirming. Derek's voice came out ragged for the first time all evening. This is insane. You're standing here making accusations in front of my guests, in front of my son. Your son, Elena said quietly, is the reason I drove 4 hours tonight. Mason has been living in that house. Mason has been watching. And Mason has been protecting his grandfather in every way a 7-year-old child knows how. From somewhere in the crowd, I heard Mason's voice, small and clear, cutting through the adult noise the way children's voices do. Daddy. He was looking at Derek. He had pushed through to the front of the crowd and was standing alone in the open space between his father and his grandmother. His voice was shaking, but he did not stop. "Daddy, you did hurt Grandpa. I saw it. This morning in the kitchen. I saw what you did." The room went to a stillness I had not thought possible. Derek looked at his 7-year-old son. Whatever he had prepared to say, whatever version of events he had assembled and was holding ready, it did not come. His mouth opened and closed, and nothing arrived. And in that silence, in the few seconds before everything moved again, I looked at my grandson standing in the middle of that room with his small hands in fists at his sides, and his chin up, and his voice still trembling from what it had cost him to say what he'd said. He turned and found me in the crowd. His eyes were full. "I told the truth, Grandpa," he said. "Like you always said." My legs nearly gave out. Lily's hand tightened on my arm and held me up, and I was grateful because I needed to be held up just then, and it was good after everything to have someone there to do it. Tiffany's chair hit the floor behind us as she stood up fast. Tiffany moved fast for someone in heels. She came up from her chair with both hands reaching forward, her eyes fixed on Elena at the microphone, her face stripped of the composed brightness she had worn all evening. What was underneath it was not grief or remorse or even fear. It was something rawer than any of those, the expression of a person who has built a careful structure around themselves and is watching it come down, and has decided that the only response available is to go through whoever is standing in the way. She did not get far. Lily had been watching Tiffany the way Lily watched most things, quietly, from the outside, tracking movement, the way you track movement when you have spent your life paying attention to rooms. When Tiffany's chair went back, Lily was already turning. When Tiffany took her second step, Lily was already between her and Elena. Tiffany's hands came up and made contact with Lily's shoulders, a shove, both palms forward, the kind of contact that under California law constitutes battery regardless of what followed, witnessed by 50 people in a private dining room on Christmas Eve. Lily did not shove back. She planted her feet and absorbed the force of it, and then she did something that required less strength than it required geometry. She used Tiffany's own momentum, redirected it slightly, the way you redirect water rather than try to stop it. A shift of her body that sent Tiffany's weight continuing forward and to the right beyond where Lily was standing, toward the long buffet table that ran along the near wall. The buffet table was set with the remains of the Christmas spread. Derek had ordered silver platters and chafing dishes, and a centerpiece of pine branches and white candles that had been burning long enough to fill that corner of the room with the smell of warm wax and pine resin. Tiffany's hip caught the edge of the table. Her forward motion did not stop. Her hands went out in front of her to catch herself and found the tablecloth instead of something solid. And the tablecloth did what tablecloths do. It gave and then it pulled, and a cascade of silver serving dishes shifted and clattered as Tiffany went down hard against the corner of the table's wooden frame before landing on the floor. The room erupted. Not into screaming, into the particular sound of 50 people responding to something they did not expect, a collective intake of breath and voice that filled the space where silence had been. Several people moved forward. Several moved back. Near the center of the room, a woman I recognized from the church put her hand over her mouth. Derek was shouting something, but his voice was one of many, and I could not separate it from the rest. I was looking at Tiffany. She was on the floor beside the buffet table, one hand pressed against the left side of her face, the white tablecloth half pulled from the table and draped partially over her legs. The pine centerpiece had come down with her and lay sideways on the floor. The candles extinguished, the branches splayed out around her in a way that seemed almost deliberate, like something arranged for effect. She took her hand away from her face. The skin around her left eye was red in the way that skin goes red before it goes dark, the color of something changing underneath the surface, the body beginning the process. It begins when tissue has been compressed against bone. It was swollen already. It would be purple by morning. Exactly where mine was. I do not know what I expected to feel when I saw it. In all the months of planning and all the phone calls and photographs and recorded testimonies, nobody had predicted this specific moment, the geometry of it, the way consequence had arrived, wearing the same face as the injury that had started everything. I had not wished this on Tiffany. I want to be clear about that. I had wished for justice, which is a different thing, a larger and more patient thing than what the word revenge suggests. But standing there with my own swollen eye, watching Tiffany hold her swollen eye, I felt something move through me that was not satisfaction and not sorrow, but something that lived between them, the strange, vertiginous feeling of symmetry, the world briefly balancing itself in a way the world rarely does. Derek pushed through to Tiffany and crouched beside her. She attacked her, he was saying to the room, to anyone who would listen, his voice cracking at the edges. You all saw it. She attacked my wife, that's assault. Somebody needs to. Your wife initiated physical contact first, said a voice from near the far wall. Calm. Carrying. The voice of someone accustomed to rooms that needed to be brought to order. The woman who had been standing with Carol all evening stepped forward. She was holding something in her right hand, a leather case flipped open. A badge caught the light from the restaurant's chandeliers. Detective Sandra Okafor, she said to the room generally, and to Derek specifically. Elder Abuse Unit. Mr. Harmon Walt, are you in need of medical attention? The question was addressed to me. Me, specifically, by name. A law enforcement official in a room full of people asking Walt Harmon if he needed help. I had not been asked that question by anyone with the authority to act on the answer in 3 years. My voice, when it came, was steadier than I had any right to expect. I'd like to go home, I said. I'd like to go home with my wife and my daughter. Detective Okafor nodded. We'll get you there. She turned to Derek, who was still crouching beside Tiffany, his hand on her shoulder, his face cycling through expressions too fast to settle on any of them. Mr. Harmon, I need you to stand up, please. I have some questions that can't wait. I'm not answering anything without a lawyer, Derek said. That is absolutely your right, Detective Okafor said pleasantly. She had the manner of someone for whom this response was entirely familiar and not at all inconvenient. You're welcome to call one now. I do need you to stand up. Mason had backed up against the wall near the door. I crossed to him slowly, my body reminding me with each step of the morning's events, and I crouched down in front of him, my knees protesting, my eye throbbing, the room loud and bright and chaotic around us. His face was pale, and his lower lip was trembling, and he was holding his backpack against his chest, with both arms, the way he held it when he had something precious inside. You did something very brave tonight, I told him. I was scared, he said. I know, I said. That's what makes it brave. He threw his arms around my neck. I held him carefully, my old arms around my grandson, in the middle of the mess we had all made together, and the better thing we were building out of it. Over his shoulder, I watched Derek get to his feet. Derek stood with his hands at his sides and his jaw working like a man trying to locate words he had misplaced. This is my family, he said to Detective Okafor, to the room, to no one in particular. These are my guests. You can't just, Dad. Mason's voice cut through Derek's, the way a child's voice always cuts through adult noise, not by being louder, but by being entirely different in quality, a sound that belongs to a register that human beings are wired to attend to before any other. Derek stopped. Mason had come out from where I was holding him. He stood in the open space between his father and Detective Okafor, still clutching his backpack. His eyes were red from crying, but his voice when it came was steady in the way that things are steady when they have already passed through the worst of their shaking. "You told Grandpa he couldn't call anybody," Mason said. "You told him his phone didn't work right. But I heard you tell Tiffany you changed the numbers." His chin trembled. He did not stop. "And when Grandpa cried in the storage room this morning, I heard him through the door. I heard everything he said to Aunt Lily." The room did not breathe. Derek crouched down to Mason's level. His voice dropped into something that was meant to sound gentle. "Buddy, you don't understand what you heard. Grown-up stuff is complicated and—" "I drew pictures," Mason said. "I gave them to Grandpa and to Grandma because I didn't know what else to do." He opened the front pocket of his backpack and took out 2 folded pieces of paper, Walt's drawings, the ones Mason had been carrying. He held them out toward Detective Okafor. "I want her to have these." Detective Okafor crossed to Mason and accepted the drawings with both hands. She looked at them briefly, then looked up at Derek with an expression that required no interpretation. Derek straightened up. He looked around the room one final time at the guests, at Carol, at Pastor Gerald, at Elena on the platform, at Lily standing beside me, at Tiffany, still on the floor, with a restaurant employee crouched beside her, at his own son standing in the middle of everything, holding an empty backpack. The door behind him opened. Everyone turned. Ryan Harmon was 40 years old and looked enough like Derek that several people in the room visibly startled. He was dressed in jeans and a canvas jacket, the clothes of someone who had driven through the night and not stopped to change. He stood in the doorway and looked at Derek and did not say anything for a long moment. Then he looked at me. "Dad," he said. His voice broke on the word. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. Ryan's eyes were wet. He crossed the room toward me, and I opened my arms, and my younger son walked into them the way he had when he was 8 years old, and the world had been too large for him. He was 40 now, and the world had been made artificially small for me, and neither of us was 8 years old anymore. But the feeling was the same, 2 people who belonged to each other, finding each other after being kept apart. Derek's voice came from behind us, thinner now, the performance finally failing. "Ryan, don't. Whatever they told you. I drove 17 hours, Ryan said without turning around. "I think I understand." Pastor Gerald moved through the crowd. He stopped in front of me, and his face held the particular expression of a man reckoning with something he cannot undo but has decided he must address anyway. "Walt," he said, "I should have listened to you. Every Sunday you tried to tell me and I—" His voice gave out. He pressed his lips together and tried again. "God forgive me, I should have listened." I looked at my old friend. 31 years. I was not ready to tell him it was all right because it was not all right, not yet. But I could tell him the truth. "You're here now, Gerald," I said. "That counts for something." He nodded. His eyes were bright. He stepped back and let Ryan keep his arm around my shoulders, and I let myself lean into my son's weight just slightly, just enough. Detective Okafor did not rush. That was the thing I noticed most about her in those minutes, the unhurried quality of her movements, the way she occupied the room without claiming it, the particular patience of someone who had done this many times and understood that speed was less important than certainty. She had worked elder abuse cases for 14 years, Carol had told Elena, and it showed in the way she moved through that dining room. Steady, observant, letting the situation finish, assembling itself, before she applied the weight of her authority to it. Derek was still talking. He had been talking since Ryan walked in, a continuous stream of explanation and reframing and redirection that had grown increasingly untethered from the facts in the room. He talked about family dynamics and misunderstandings and the particular difficulty of caring for an aging parent, about how Walt had always been stubborn, about how Elena had never understood the daily reality of what Derek was managing, about how Lily had always resented him. The words came fast and layered the verbal equivalent of a man throwing everything he owned in front of a door he was trying to keep closed. Detective Okafor listened to all of it with the same expression. Patient. Cataloging. When Derek paused for breath, she spoke. "Mr. Harmon," she said, "I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. You're saying that the injuries to your father's eye and eyebrow were the result of a foul." "That's right," Derek said. "He loses his balance sometimes. And the recording made this morning in which Walt Harmon states that you caused those injuries in the kitchen during a disagreement about a property document, you're saying that recording is inaccurate." Derek's jaw tightened. "It's been manipulated. You can't just—" "The recording was made on a device belonging to Lily Harmon," Detective Okafor said. "It is time-stamped. The metadata is intact. It has not been edited." She said it without emphasis, the way you state a fact that has already been established and does not require argument. "I've had 14 hours to review the materials Mrs. Harmon provided. The recording is one of 23 pieces of documentation I received 6 weeks ago." The room had gone very quiet again. Derek's continuous stream of words had finally stopped dammed up somewhere between his chest and his throat. Elena stepped down from the platform. She crossed to Detective Okafor and held out a thick manila envelope, the one she had carried from Fresno, in the inside pocket of her green coat against her chest for 4 hours. "This is the complete file," Elena said. "Photographs, financial records, the SSA correspondence, the power of attorney documentation. The photographs of the forged will, the recorded phone calls, Carol's incident log, and the copies of the intercepted letters with handwriting analysis, comparing the forged signatures to Walt's authenticated samples." Detective Okafor accepted the envelope with both hands. She did not open it. She did not need to, she already knew what was in it. She set it on the nearest table and turned back to Derek. "Walter Harmon," she said, addressing me directly, "I want to be transparent with you about what happens next. Under California Penal Code Section 368, elder abuse that results in physical injury to a person over 65 years of age is a felony. Given the documented pattern of financial control isolation and physical harm, and given the statements made in this room tonight by multiple witnesses, including a minor child, I have sufficient grounds to take your son into custody without a warrant. That is called a warrantless arrest for felony, and it is legal under California law when a felony has been committed in the presence of a law enforcement officer, or when there is probable cause supported by this level of evidence." She paused. "Do you understand what I've just told you?" "Yes," I said. My voice was very steady. I had not expected it to be, but it was. Detective Okafor turned to Derek. 2 uniformed officers had appeared in the doorway. I had not seen them arrive, had not heard them, but there they were, called ahead, waiting for exactly this. "Derek Allen Harmon," Detective Okafor said, "I am placing you under arrest on suspicion of elder abuse under California Penal Code Section 368. Financial elder abuse under Welfare and Institutions, Code Section 15-600, 10.30, and forgery under Penal Code Section 470. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." Derek did not move for a moment. He looked at Elena. He looked at Ryan. He looked at Mason, who had pressed himself against Carol Brennan's side and was watching with wide, exhausted eyes. Then he looked at me. I do not know what he was looking for. Whatever it was, I cannot be certain I gave it to him. I looked back at my son, this man I had carried on my shoulders, taught to use a hammer, sat beside at Little League games on hard aluminum bleachers in the California summer heat, and I felt the full weight of all of it, the love and the grief and the years and the damage, and I did not look away. "Dad," he started. "Go with them, Derek," I said quietly. "Just go." He went. The officers moved to either side of him, and the three of them walked toward the door, and the 50 people who had come to Harrington's for a Christmas party stood in silence and watched Derek Allen Harmon leave the room he had designed to show them how well his life was going. Tiffany, helped to her feet by a restaurant employee, was escorted out through a separate door by a third officer who had materialized from somewhere I hadn't tracked. She did not look at me as she passed. She did not look at anyone. Carol appeared at my elbow. She took my arm in both of her hands and held on, and I covered her hands with mine, and we stood like that while the room slowly began to breathe again around us. 22 entries, I said. 23 by the end, she said. I added tonight. I laughed. It came out rough and broken, the laugh of a man who hadn't laughed in a very long time, and it felt like something tearing loose that needed to tear. Carol laughed too quietly beside me, and then Elena was there on my other side, and Ryan behind me, and Lily in front of me, and Mason wrapped around my waist, and the Christmas music that had been playing through all of it was still going steady and indifferent. Something with bells, the same song it had been when Elena picked up the microphone, and the world began to change. After Derek left the room, the party did not end so much as dissolve. People did not rush for the exits. They stood in small clusters, speaking in low voices, the way people speak after something significant has happened, in a shared space, processing it together, comparing what they had seen from their particular angle of the room, occasionally looking toward me, and then looking away when they realized I had noticed. A few people came and spoke to me directly. An older man named Garrett, who had worked with me on the church roof 30 years ago, gripped my hand with both of his and said my name twice and could not seem to find anything else. A woman I recognized from Carroll's Street put her arms around me without asking permission and held on for a moment, and I let her because it cost nothing and seemed to matter to her a great deal. Pastor Gerald stayed. He sat in one of the dining chairs near the window while the room slowly emptied around him, and when most of the other guests had gone, he got up and came to where I was sitting with Elena and Ryan and Mason at a table in the corner. The four of us, with glasses of water and the remains of a bread basket someone had put in front of us, eating, because it was something to do with our hands. Gerald pulled out a chair and sat across from me. He folded his hands on the table and looked at them for a moment. "I want to say something," he said, "and I want to say it right, so bear with me." "Take your time," I said. "I have known you since we were both young enough to get on a roof without our knees complaining," he said. "And in all those years, I never once had reason to doubt your word. Not once." He paused. "Derek came to me in February. He was very concerned, very loving sounding. He said you had been having episodes of confusion, that you sometimes said things that weren't true without realizing it, that the family was managing it quietly to protect your dignity." "I know what he told you," I said. "I believed him," Gerald said. "Walt, I believed him, because I wanted to believe that a son was doing right by his father. I wanted that to be the story." His voice dropped. "That is not an excuse. I am telling you so that you understand I know exactly what I did and what it cost you. The community you had built here, I handed him the tools to take it from you. And I am more sorry for that than I know how to say." Elena's hand found mine under the table. I held it. "Gerald," I said, "I am not going to tell you it didn't matter. It mattered. There were Sundays when I sat in that pew and watched you nod along with his version of me, and I felt something go out in my chest like a light. I looked at my old friend's face, the lines in it deeper than I remembered, the eyes behind his glasses red-rimmed. But you're here tonight, and you stood up when it counted. Gerald pressed his lips together. He nodded slowly. I'd like to bring a meal over tomorrow, he said. If you'll have me. Christmas dinner, Elena said before I could answer. Come for Christmas dinner. Bring enough for 6. He laughed a short, grateful sound and nodded again, and some of the weight in the room shifted. Mason had fallen asleep in Ryan's lap by 8:30, his head tipped sideways against Ryan's arm, his backpack still looped over one shoulder, even in sleep. Ryan sat very still so as not to wake him, one hand resting on the boy's back, his eyes moving between Walt and Elena, with the expression of a man recalibrating everything he thought he knew about his family. He talked to me twice a month, Ryan said quietly across the sleeping child. Derek, for 2 years. He told me Dad had been saying I didn't care about the family, that I'd chosen my life in Seattle over everyone here. He shook his head. I should have called directly. I should have. He controlled the phone, I said. Ryan, he controlled all of it. That is not something you could have known. Ryan's jaw worked. He looked down at Mason sleeping against his arm. What happens to him? Ryan asked. To Mason, while all of this is going through the courts. Elena and I looked at each other. It was the question we had not yet answered, the large shape of it sitting in the room alongside all the other large shapes the evening had produced. He stays with us, I said. Until someone tells me differently, he stays with his grandmother and me. Ryan nodded slowly. Then he said, I'd like to help with whatever comes next. I can work remotely. I could stay for a while if that's useful. Elena reached across the table and touched Ryan's arm. It's useful, she said simply. I looked around the dining room of Harrington's, mostly empty. The white tablecloths disordered the Christmas decorations, undisturbed, and somehow incongruous the wreaths and the lights and the pine branches, continuing their patient decorating as though the evening had gone the way it was planned. On the floor near the buffet table, the pine centerpiece that had come down with Tiffany still lay on its side. The white candles had gone cold. The branches had begun to dry out in the warm air of the restaurant. I thought about the last thing Derek had said to me before the officers took him out. Not the public statement, not the explanation. He had been offering the room the other thing. The small thing said quietly as he passed within arm's reach of where I was standing. Not quite looking at me, his voice barely above a murmur. He had said I didn't mean for it to go this far. I had not responded. I did not know yet what to do with those words, whether they were the beginning of something true or simply the last reframe of a man who could not stop reframing. I had put them somewhere interior and left them there, the way you leave something you are not ready to examine, knowing you will come back to it. There would be time. Tonight, what mattered was that Elena's hand was in mine under the table, warm and solid and present in the way that it had been present for 48 years. What mattered was Mason breathing slowly in his uncle's lap. What mattered was Ryan sitting across from me with 17 hours of driving in his bones and no intention of going anywhere. What mattered was that for the first time in 3 years, I was in a room and not afraid of it. Lily came back from wherever she had gone outside, I thought, making phone calls, handling the 100 practical things that needed handling, and slid into the chair beside me. She looked at the table, at the breadbasket, at Mason sleeping. Ready to go home, Dad? She asked. I thought about what home meant now. Not the house on Clearwater Drive. That would take time, the lawyers and the courts, and the untangling of everything Derek had tied up. Elena's apartment in Fresno for now, or Ryan's offer to stay. or some other arrangement we had not yet worked out. But home was not a house. I had built enough houses to know that. "Yeah," I said, "let's go home." People always talk about justice like it is a door, like you push through it, and whatever is on the other side is the destination. What nobody tells you is that justice is not a door. It is more like the end of a long illness. The fever breaks, the pain recedes, but the body still has to learn how to be well again, and that part takes longer than anyone expects. The legal process moved faster than I had anticipated. The durable power of attorney was invalidated by the court. Within 10 days, a judge reviewed the circumstances and determined it had been obtained through misrepresentation, which under California law rendered it void. The SSA was notified. The representative payee arrangement was terminated, and my Social Security payments were redirected to an account in my own name. I stood at the kitchen table in Elena's apartment in Fresno and looked at the deposit notification and felt all of it at once, relief and fury and grief, and something that was not quite pride, but lived next to it. Mason stayed with us. A family court judge granted Elena and me temporary guardianship within a week. Mason slept in the small room off the hallway on a bed Ryan drove to IKEA to buy on December 27th. On Christmas morning, the real one, quiet and unhurried, with grocery store cinnamon rolls and ornaments Lily brought in a shoebox, Mason came to find me in the kitchen and climbed into the chair beside me and said, "Good morning," like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. It was the best ordinary thing I had experienced in years. Ryan stayed through New Year's. He spent his afternoons with Mason card games, walks to the park, the unremarkable things a child needs when his world has been upended, and he requires proof that adults can still be counted on. Carol brought dinner on the 26th. Pastor Gerald came Christmas Day with enough food for 6 and stayed 4 hours. At some point, we ended up on Elena's small balcony with our coats on and our coffee going cold, not talking about much, just sitting the way old friends sit when the words have been used up and what remains is simply the being there. On the 29th, I walked to the pharmacy 2 blocks away. I bought aspirin, a newspaper, and a cup of coffee from the machine near the door. I paid with a $20 bill from my own wallet and walked back in the December air with the newspaper under my arm. I sat at Elena's kitchen table and read it front to back. 40 minutes. The best 40 minutes I had spent in 3 years. My eye healed. The swelling faded. The bruise moved through its colors and disappeared. The cut left a small scar I could feel but not quite see. One morning, Elena noticed me touching it and put her hand over mine and left it there without saying anything. That was the right thing. After 48 years, she still knew what the right thing was. The morning of New Year's Eve, Mason was at the kitchen table with his sketchbook. 2 figures in front of a house, the same drawing he had made on the back porch of Clearwater Drive 6 months ago. But in this version, the house had more windows, and in every window there was light. He looked up when I came in. "I made it for you," he said. I sat beside him and looked at it for a long time. "Thank you, buddy," I said. He nodded, the way he nodded when something mattered, and went back to drawing. And I sat with my coffee and watched the morning light come up over Elena's neighborhood and thought about all the windows in all the houses I had ever built and how the light always looked best coming through them. I stayed silent for 3 years. I told myself it was to keep the peace, to protect Mason, to give my son one more chance to become better than what he was showing me. But silence is not patience. Sometimes silence is just fear wearing a quieter coat. If you are living a family story like mine, if someone is slowly taking pieces of you and calling it love, please do not wait as long as I did. Tell someone. Make the call. Even from a dark room with an old phone and a number you memorized years ago. God does not ask us to endure what destroys us. He asks us to be brave enough to reach for the hand being offered. These grandpa stories exist because families are complicated and love can be weaponized by the wrong people. This family story taught me that home is not a house. It is the people who drive 4 hours through the dark to find you. My personal belief, the one I will carry for whatever years I have left, is this: a man's worth is not in what he owns. It is in what he refuses to let go of. If this family story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know. One final note. Some stories on this channel contain fictional elements created for storytelling and educational purposes. If that is not the content you are looking for, we completely respect your choice. Please feel free to find what suits you best. We will always be here for those who stay.